The Honor Magic V5 has been easily one of the most highly anticipated devices for viewers of my channel. I have been using it for a good little while now, and today I'm going to give you my full review, my thoughts on the Honor Magic V5. Strap in, this is going to be a long one. We have a lot of ground to cover. So really quickly, before we dive into the hardware of the Honor Magic V5, I want to take a moment and talk about this case that did come in the box. It is something that I really wanted to like. For one, it just looks really good, but two, you've got this kickstand here that I think is so smart because you wouldn't even necessarily know that it's there. It just sort of folds out of the way and it just ends up looking like a cool little accent on the case. And this case does have hinge protection, which I know a lot of people really like. It's magnetic, and whenever you open up the device, it just sort of slides out of the way, but there is a problem with this mechanism. And we saw this exact same thing with the Oppo Find N5. If I unlock my device, if you look very closely, you should be able to see a couple of pretty small, but I think noticeable scratches on the screen. Now, this does have a screen protector that comes pre-installed. So those scratches are actually on that screen protector, but nonetheless, it is being scratched by that hinge protection. As you open it, that kind of just slides right across the screen, and it is, like I said, scratching that screen protector. So I do really want to love this case, but unfortunately, to prevent further scratches of that screen protector, which will drive me crazy and eventually lead me to remove it, we're going to be taking it off. So now with the case out of the way, we can go around this device and look at some notable things. First off, the color of this thing, the pattern is actually really quite interesting. It has this like brushed metal look, and now it looks like it's going sort of this way. But if you hold it in the right angle, it actually switches. There's another direction of sort of that brushing, which I think does look really cool. Obviously, elephant in the room, there's that camera bump that is just absolutely massive. In fact, when the device is opened, I think this is thicker than the device itself, which is crazy, but that did allow Honor to pack in some very impressive camera hardware, which we will be covering a bit later on in the video. On the side here, we do have a fingerprint scanner / power button, as well as a volume rocker. Up top, we have a microphone and a speaker grill. On the hinge side, check out that really cool pattern. This looks like it would be textured, but it's not. It is smooth. It's just a pattern. And then on the bottom, we have a USB-C port, the SIM tray, and another speaker. I'll point this out again because I think it's actually very interesting. The speakers, one is here and one is here, mimicking what has been done in the past by Google with the Pixels and Surface Duo as well. This means you have stereo audio in this orientation, or this orientation, or this orientation. However you hold the device, you're going to have stereo audio, which I really like. Obviously, the device is very thin and very lightweight. It is right there with the Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 7 in both of those metrics. We could get out a set of calipers and we could measure these things and do all of that. And maybe a couple of months ago I would have, but I have so tired of that exercise that we're not going to do that. They're both very thin and they're both very light. If either one of them wants to make the claim of being the thinnest and the lightest, I don't care because it's so close that it doesn't even matter, okay? Both of them feel very similar. Somewhere else where they're very similar is with the number of folds they are rated for. They both are apparently good for 500,000 folds, but that does not mean that they feel the same when they are unfolding. Compared to the Z Fold 7, this device opens up much easier. The magnets holding it together perhaps are what's causing this difference, but it is much easier to open. And when it closes, you have this sound, which I just talked through because it just kind of fell shut on its own. Try that again. That is our sound closing with the Z Fold 7. It is a little different. Kind of more of a higher pitched, slightly louder clunk because of those magnets. Hopefully that came through. If I slide that Fold 7 back in one more time, when I'm looking at these two devices, if I'm trying to kind of determine which one of these, is more premium or feels better, whatever it might be, there's just not an obvious answer to that question. Obviously, once we start talking about the camera hardware, the battery size, and charging speed, there does start to become a distance between the two. But in terms of just like hand feel, using the device's build quality, there's not a big difference between the two. They both look and feel great. I have gotten a lot of questions about how much wider the screen on the Magic V5 is compared to the Z Fold 7, so we're just going to measure it. I will bust out the caliper for this. So that looks pretty close, about let's just say 65 millimeters. If we come over here to the Magic V5, we do need to widen it out just a little bit. So from just under 65 to about 67. So I know that once again, it looks like it is a much wider device than the Z Fold 7. There's something, an optical illusion. It's about 2 millimeters wider, so not a very significant difference. And I would say that the same is probably true of the crease. I think that the Honor Magic V5's crease is probably a little bit more narrow. I think that in terms of depth, they do feel very, very similar. Overall, both are very hard to notice unless you are trying to see them. When it comes to screen brightness, the simplest thing for me to do is often to just put all of these devices on automatic brightness, which in theory should have them hitting their highest global peak brightness, and then bring them out in the sun and just kind of let you see what it looks like. Change angles here, trying to kind of adjust that glare a little bit. And what we have here is the Oppo Find N5, the Pixel 9 Pro Fold, the Galaxy Z Fold 7, and the Honor Magic V5. And I don't think that it should be too controversial where the brightness of the Honor Magic V5 should be ranking between these four phones. Now, one interesting thing that continues to happen is this. It is on automatic brightness, and it just does not want to stay maxed out. And I don't know if this is a thermal thing, if it's just getting too warm and it doesn't want to stay at peak brightness, or what the deal is, but it is clearly dimmer than the rest. I took all the phones inside and I let them cool off a little bit, and you can see we're already losing peak brightness. Let me move out of the way and let the sun hit it, and it should boost up, but instead it's boosting down. So we're going to turn off automatic brightness and we're just going to crank it up manually. And again, I mean, it seems like maybe it helped a little bit, but to me, the Fold 7 is still just far and away the brightest screen of the bunch. Again, no real issues with the others, but if you're looking for the brightest screen, I think it's pretty obviously the Fold. Since we did just talk about those speakers and the positioning, I'm going to quickly give you a speaker test. If you want to hear how this compares to the Galaxy Z Fold 7, check out my unboxing and first impressions, because I did do a side-by-side, but for now, let's check this out. When we talk about these super thin foldables, there's kind of been a trend of basically sacrificing speaker performance in the pursuit of that thickness. You guys know that the Oppo Find N5 speakers were pretty bad. The Z Fold 7s were worse than the Z Fold 6, but definitely a lot better than the Oppo Find N5. These I find to be somewhere in the territory of the Galaxy Z Fold 7. I do think that they are louder than the Fold 7, but they do probably distort a little bit more than the Fold 7. I think the Fold 7 has an overall more pleasing tone, but these are louder and they do have the proper stereo separation, so maybe a little bit of a draw there. I don't see the speakers as being a problem in the same way they were for the Find N5. I don't really know any other way to say this, but just to say that the software is different. As someone who has used the Samsung devices, Pixel, I've used Oppo, OnePlus, all these different devices, the Honor Magic V5's software experience is just different. And some of that is good and some of it is just strange to me. What I'll say is there's just kind of like an extra flourish on most everything. Every animation that you see is just a little bit extra. Maybe it's just a little bit slower. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but it just seems like there's been more attention to detail on these animations. And look, they look really, really good. Every animation that plays on this device honestly looks great. It's so smooth. If we pull up our taskbar and we open up the app drawer, look at that animation. Look at how it doesn't just kind of expand that app drawer, it also like jiggles the icons. Like everything has this little additional flourish to it. Something else that kind of demonstrates a different approach is that not only have they, of course, separated their control center from their notifications, you can swipe down here, or you can swipe down here, or you can swipe back and forth between them. I can't find a setting that actually lets me rejoin these things again. You are stuck in iPhone land. In a way, it almost feels like they don't want this to feel like Android. If you go to edit your home screen, you can see here, there's no option that says widgets. They call them cards. I don't know why they don't want to call widgets widgets, but they don't. They call them cards, and this is what it actually looks like. You have some sort of suggested ones up top, and then you can get to the rest of your widgets here, and then it says classic widgets down here to get to your actual, like your installed app widgets. You're like a couple of steps away from that. And you can see here, they call them widgets there, but they do call them cards in terms of how you get to them. Now, don't get me wrong. Some of these changes that they are making are anything but bad. They're just really different. If we go to customize things, you can see that they're doing some really cool stuff with your lock screen. I'll kind of walk you through how you do this. So if we pick a lock screen style, you'll see that you have all of these different styles to choose from. But what's cool is when you pick one of these magic lock screen options, you can edit them, right? So let's do this one. I like this composite effect. So you select this and it puts in this lady, and you can see she's sort of fading away into a different image. You can try your own images though. Let's do change image and then change portrait. And we can use this photo of my dog, and you can see that it has automatically cut him out, and you can see that overlay down there below him. You can also see that it will kind of allow him to go on top of the clock just a little bit. So you can have this set up like this, and then maybe you're like, oh, the mountains don't really make a lot of sense. So we can change the overlay as well. And we'll just do this photo of a bee that I saw earlier. It's not necessarily a great option there, but you can see how that works. This looks terrible, but again, you get the idea. Keep in mind, you can also customize like how much that overlay is actually creeping in. There's so much stuff that you can do to customize your lock screen with this software. And there's all these different ones that you can do. Like it actually changed this color based on the photo as well. These are really good ideas, and they're really well executed. I also want to point out that out of the box, a lot of applications like Google Keep aren't going to show you their dual panel layout. And the reason is because you need to go into your settings, into display settings, and then display size, and actually shrink things down to small. Doing that obviously makes things much smaller, but it's going to give you that dual panel layout. You might also want to bump up the font size after you do that, because that is going to obviously make the font quite small. But now you can see a lot of different apps are going to have a layout that takes advantage of this larger screen, but it's not like that out of the box. A couple of other small, like weird things about this operating system that I'm just having a hard time getting used to. If you're using this inner screen and you have another application open and someone sends you a text message and you go into your notifications to open that, it will open them in a floating window automatically. And I've actually found some other apps that have this same behavior. Again, you're on the inner screen, you already have an app open, and you touch a notification from Gmail. The same thing is going to happen. It's going to open it up in a floating window. And if there is a setting that disables that, I haven't been able to find it, and I'm not a fan. Something else that I've been having some issues with have been notifications. And this is kind of something that's been complicated and hard to pin down. I think that it is an issue that comes and goes, and I'm not entirely sure why. But this happens fairly often for me with the Honor Magic V5. I take it out of my pocket and I go to do something, and when I unlock it or I see that lock screen, I see that I have missed a phone call, a text message, an email, or all of those things all at once since the phone has been in my pocket. I have gone as far as sending myself emails, and sometimes those emails vibrate and sometimes they don't. I've also noticed that the vibration itself to alert you to a notification is fairly weak, so maybe it's a combination of these two things causing this, but I'm really not sure. Now, there are some areas where this operating system does actually remind me a little bit of what Samsung does, and part of this is just because of the sheer, almost overwhelming number of features that they have packed in. An obvious one to point out is this right here, which I believe they call the Magic Capsule, and it does something very similar to the Now bar, except they do have it covering up that hole punch selfie camera. Another interesting feature to look at over here on the Z Fold 7 is called AI Select. And what this does, you see that it actually automatically snapped onto that image, but we're going to circle a bit more than that just to get a bit of a better example. You can see here generative edit, text as wallpaper, text extraction. I can crop, I can pin, I can copy, I can share, I can download. All of these different options appear for this AI Select option. Over here on the Honor Magic V5, if you swipe in and hold, you do have a sidebar that is very similar. We're going to tap on Magic Portal, and we're going to try to sort of select the same general area. And what you're going to see here is a very different approach. So extract text is there, and then several different places where I can share this to also pop up. Where Samsung is trying to give you this like fully featured AI toolbox that's going to be able to do a whole bunch of different things, what Honor is doing seems to be more focused on simply grabbing content on your screen and then sharing it, maybe quickly marking it up, cropping it, whatever you might do if it's an image that you're sending, but mostly just grabbing stuff and sending it someplace else. So on the surface level, they seem similar, but in reality, they are very, very different. One cool thing that I will praise them for is that little magic portal thing can actually be triggered just by drawing a circle with your knuckle. For some reason, I was having a hard time getting this to happen a moment ago, but there you go. It is working correctly there. So just take your knuckle and draw a circle. That's actually pretty cool. When you start digging into this device, there is just so much. The magic sidebar, magic text, magic portal, AI subtitles, call translation, AI writing. Like there's just a million things that you can do. Very similarly to Samsung, if you highlight text you're typing in most apps, this little AI writing prompt appears and you can compose, summarize, rewrite. You can do all of this text generation stuff. I do like the proofread option being there. Let's do rewrite, and I don't know how it's going to rewrite this, but there you go. Evaluating AI capabilities. You get the general idea. And then I can send that in. In their gallery app, they do have several of their own AI photo editing things, like their own eraser, upscale, AI cutout, AI out painting, which is actually really, really cool and really useful. We'll try the eraser first, and we're just going to draw a circle around this bug. And theoretically, it's going to recognize, yep, that's what I wanted, and it's going to try to erase this and fill in the space behind it. Now, we do have things like this on most phones now with Magic Editor. Of course, Samsung has their own thing, so everybody is kind of doing this, and don't think for a second that Honor is not keeping up. I love the idea for AI outpainting. So what this is going to do is it's going to zoom the photo out. Let's see how far we can actually zoom out. Let's go super far and really push this thing to its limits. This is one of these features that Google absolutely needs to have like yesterday. I use this thing all the time to reframe photos. Take a shot, don't like the way that it's framed. I can sort of zoom it out and redo things, move things around, and have a better shot. Look at that. That is actually strikingly impressive, guys. Wow, look at the before and after. That is actually amazing. Really, really good stuff. The more you dig into your settings, the more stuff you see. Motion sickness relief. You've got all of these different options for gestures. How about a screenshot? Take your knuckle and knock twice on the screen and you've taken a screenshot. Like it is so Samsung-esque in that regard that there is so much stuff. This could honestly be like a 3-hour-long video just explaining all of the different features that they have packed into this device. And that's not even touching multitasking, which we definitely do need to spend some time on because there is some unique stuff going on here. So obviously, if you have an application open, you do have your taskbar, which you can pull up, and then you can grab another application and drop that in a side-by-side split screen view. One really cool thing here that some of you are absolutely going to love, we'll go a layer deep in this app, and we'll go a layer deep in this app. Now, this is the last app I touched. Let's go back on the left-hand side, and guess what? I'm going to go back on the left-hand side. Come over here. I'm going to go back over there. This is still using the old sort of pixel-style gesture navigation. You don't have to tap the app to bring it into focus and then go back. You can just go back, and it's going to go back on that side. But where this does diverge from what the Pixel is able to do is the fact that you can have a third application here. You can obviously drop it to replace, but if you bring it over here, look how nice and smooth that animation is. Now you do have 3 applications open. This is very similar to Open Canvas, but the difference is you're always going to be side by side by side. Now you can touch an app and then drag it out to expand it, and now you have a large app and then a smaller app and a smaller app. You can then go ahead and expand this one out, large app, small app, large app, and you can also expand this one out as well. So now you have 3 full screen-ish applications that you can be jumping between. Getting into that view, I think, is a little bit more tedious than it is on the Oppo phones. I wish there was just an expand button up top, but you can definitely do something like this that is pretty darn impressive. Another cool thing about this is you can jump straight into this from your home screen. This little button that exists down here called Quick Layout is going to get you into a side-by-side or a triple view mode. They call it Multiflex, so keep that in mind. That is the name of their multitasking system. You have Open Canvas and Boundless View, and now you have Multiflex. But you can jump straight into Multiflex from here. So there's one app, there's another app, and there's the third app. I guess I missed one of those. We'll try that again. There's the third app. So now we have all these applications open side by side. Or if you want to do 2, you can click right there, and there's your first app, and there is your second app. So that is also very, very cool. And now actually, once you're in this split screen view, you see this little handle up here at the top. What you can do with this, let's say I want to replace this app. I can grab this and just kind of throw it away, and I can see my desktop again, which is going to make it much, much easier for me to really quickly, with muscle memory, just grab another application and throw it on screen. If I want to get rid of that, toss it away, grab another application. I've been doing that a lot. And when you're in a full screen app, the same thing is kind of true. You can grab this and bring it to one side and then launch your second application. I picked the same app that was already open. There we go. Now you see what I mean. They're making really good use of this handle up here at the top. If you bring it into the middle, you can release it for a floating window, which does work very, very well. Kind of similarly to other Chinese OEMs, you can't fully resize this, or you can't change the aspect ratio. You can't shrink it down. It's not fully adjustable. You can only change the size, but it does still work pretty darn well. And you have some buttons up here to maximize or to minimize, just to kind of toss it away off the screen. Really fairly well executed. One of my only real complaints, and it is a little bit of a nitpick, if I go into split screen again, this handle is like kind of right there where the hole punch selfie camera is. So it doesn't really affect how it's used. It just doesn't look particularly great. And then like I mentioned, when you're in the multi-flex view where you have 3 applications all running at once, if you do want to maximize these, it is a bit tedious to grab and expand and go over here and expand again. I wish that they could make that a little bit of a quicker process. But I think as you've seen, through all of that, it's just remarkably smooth. This device is very well optimized. The animations look and feel fantastic. As a whole, the software that Honor has made for the Magic V5, I think is quite impressive, even if there are a few odds and ends that do drive me a little bit crazy. The separating of your quick settings and your notifications is something that I am just not on board with, and swiping back and forth between them, there are some quirks about that have kind of driven me a little bit crazy. I'm having to relearn new muscle memory, and that's something that I don't really want to do for only one phone. The animations, like I said, do look amazing, but sometimes they get in the way of other things. There are times that I swipe up to go home and I'm quickly swiping up in the middle of the screen to get to my app drawer, but it's like the phone is saying, let me finish with this animation for a second and then I can show you the app drawer. And I just wish that was a little bit quicker. Not a huge deal for sure, but it is just something that has kind of, again, been a moment where I've had to kind of relearn new muscle memory. Needing to slow down and do a more deliberate and longer stroke on my up swipe to get into my app drawer is a little bit annoying, but what isn't annoying is having great battery life, and this device absolutely has that, in addition to charging much more rapidly than the Pixel Folds or the Z Folds. This thing does have a huge battery that is just shy of 6,000 milliamp hours, and the result of that is you have a phone that, for me, on a low day, was getting a little over 6 hours of screen on time, and on a good day, I could push to over 8. Now, generally speaking, I don't use my phone more than 5 or 6 hours in a day. Now, with this phone for review, there were days that I was intentionally just pounding it, and that's when I was able to get over 8. But for me, like I said, generally speaking, what this means is I'm going to bed with something like 40%, 30% of my battery left. With my Z Fold 7, the very same use, I was going to bed with maybe 10% battery left, and that is a pretty big difference. We are like 26 minutes into this video and we still haven't talked about the cameras, and that is definitely a big part of this device. It is a very impressive camera setup with high resolution, large sensors compared to the other foldables on the market. And the result of having that really good hardware is, by and large, very, very good performance. Now, this is a Chinese OEM phone, and because of that, the processing is just going to look a little bit different than what you're maybe used to on your Samsung device or on your Pixel device. The most obvious thing that you're going to notice is that most of these photos are just going to look brighter than what my Z Fold 7 is delivering. You might also notice some occasional differences in the way that colors are being handled. Sometimes certain colors might be exaggerated just a little bit beyond what was, maybe you could say, the more natural colors you saw in real life. Here you can see a couple of shots taken at 2x digital zoom, but then actually cropped in even further. And as you can see, both devices are rendering a pretty impressive level of detail. Now, I know I said that the photos tended to be very, very bright, but I did also have some situations where the exposure went the other way. It seems like for me, if there is a problem with this camera system, beyond just being a little bit more saturated than I like, it's with the exposure just being kind of inconsistent. Sometimes it likes to be super bright, sometimes it doesn't know when to be appropriately bright, but that's a minor nitpick, and most of the time, it's delivering really, really impressive shots. The ultra wide is 50 megapixels, and because of that, it is again very, very detailed. And I will say that their processing is at least fairly consistent. You aren't dealing with ultra wide shots that look wildly different from your primary photos, and I think that it does a pretty darn good job. But for me, the star of the show is going to be that 64 megapixel 1/2 inch telephoto camera. It is a 3x optical zoom, but because of that sensor size and because of that resolution, you can zoom in exceptionally far. Yes, 3x shots look great, but 6x shots look effectively lossless, and using this to zoom in and basically do macro photos has been a great experience. And then when you push things to the extreme, Honor is using AI technology to basically fix your crazy zoom level photos. We are now seeing more and more OEMs adopt this technology. Even Google is doing this, but Honor is already doing this to pretty impressive effect. If the phone recognizes what you're photographing at 30x or higher, it can use AI to spruce up that photo in a way that I think actually looks quite natural and can render a pretty mind-boggling result. I've also been pretty darn impressed with low light performance. even though occasionally shots are a little bit brighter than they naturally, I think, should be, detail overall is very, very impressive, pretty consistently outperforming the Z Fold 7. Video performance in particular in good lighting, I think, is very impressive as well. It looks very similar to the photos in that they are a little bit artificially bright and a little bit oversaturated for my taste, but they do look good and they do look social media ready. In low light, honestly, things hold up pretty darn well. There's not an overwhelming amount of noise. Colors stay pretty consistent. I will put this right there with my Z Fold 7. Portrait mode is another highlight on this device. I don't know that I've seen another phone handle runaway, flyaway hairs better than what Honor is doing here. I do think that there is maybe a little bit of face smoothing still happening even with that setting turned off, but the actual cutout and the look of the bokeh is very, very good. As I mentioned in an earlier video, when you are taking photos of your pets, if you zoom in on the detail in their fur, things do look a little bit strange. So when you're taking portraits of your dogs or your cats, maybe just don't pinch to zoom in too far. I'm not exactly sure what's going on there, but by and large, portraits, man, they look pretty darn great. So putting it all together, one of the biggest things that normally come into play in a review like this is the price of the device. But this is actually kind of complicated because for a lot of my audience, you're probably going to have to import the thing. And if you do that, the price is going to be around $1,800 or so, $1,874 here on the average dad tech store. That was Wanda Mobile I showed you before. If you're in other regions where this global variant is launching, the prices are going to be what they're going to be. So we kind of have to take the price and set it aside because it is so extremely variable and just sort of evaluate what I think of the phone in a vacuum. And with that in mind, it's hard to say anything other than the Honor Magic V5 is a fantastic phone with an incredible feature set and extremely impressive hardware. Now, there are some software things that have bothered me a little bit. A lot of it is just different approaches to things, things that I'm not used to, things that aren't my preference. But by and large, like I said, this is a fantastic phone. Quickly, I do want to say thanks to Honor for sending this phone over for me to review. As with all of my reviews, no money has changed hands for the production of this review, and they are actually seeing my video at the exact same time as all of you because they had no early copy and no editorial input, so you know these are my honest thoughts and opinions. Guys, let me know your thoughts and opinions in those comments down below. Check out the link in the description to see more of the Honor Magic V5. Subscribe for more content just like this, and until next time, stay nerdy, my friends.